Well, welcome. So, yesterday I read to you the first chapter of School by Gordon Corman. And I talked to you about paying attention to the lead, how they started the beginning of our story, the setting where the story takes place, the character. We met Cap Anderson so far, and his grandmother, Rain, who's not really his grandmother. And I asked you to look for some descriptive language, so things that were interesting that really made a good picture in your head. Today, I'm going to ask you to look at lead again for the beginning of chapter 2 and see what you think about that. And then I'm going to erase that actually, and I'm going to ask you to look at this other idea, which is making inferences. Inferences is when you read something, the actual text, and then you read between the lines. You kind of make a prediction or a guess, or you develop an idea based on what was said. So, inferences. Now, in Reader's Workshop, you're going to talk a lot about making inferences and reading closely to get a deeper level of the story. In this story, what I've noticed so far, what I can infer, is that Cap comes from a family that lives a very alternative lifestyle. And that because of that, the norms, the things you and I live by that we think are normal, like dialing 911 in an emergency, Cap doesn't have any experience with. And I'm guessing Gordon Corman wants us to notice that's going to have an integral, an important part in this story and understanding it. So let's see what the second chapter brings us. Oh my. Okay, chapter 2, name Mrs. Donnelly. So this is going to come from Mrs. Donnelly's perspective as opposed to Capricorn, so another character that we're meeting. The instant I saw him standing there with all that hair and all those beads, I just knew. Garland Farm, it had to be. Nobody else looked like that. Nobody had looked like that since 1970, except at Garland. He seemed terrified, and with good reason. No one knew what lay ahead for him better than I did. I held out my hand. I'm Mrs. Donnelly. He made no move to take it. Capricorn. Capricorn, wasn't that just classic? My own name, Flora, was short for Floramundi, a world of flowers. I'd been out of that place more than 30 years, but one sight of this kid and it all came roaring back in a tsunami of day-glow ponchos and organic lentils. There's some visualizing for you. I'd been out of that place more than 30 years, but one sight of this kid and it all came roaring back in a tsunami of day-glow ponchos and organic lentils. Not everybody visualizes organic lentils, I don't think. I was 5 when my family joined the community, too young to remember any life before that. For 6 long years, that place was my universe. I ran around barefoot, wearing peasant dresses, shared my parents with the other kids, protested the Vietnam War, did farm chores, and listened to a whole lot of sitar music. So help me, I didn't know how weird it all was until my parents decided they were too old to be hippies anymore, and we rejoined the real world. That part I remember like it was yesterday. This little flower child, who barely knew how a doorknob worked, suddenly dropped in the middle of a society several centuries ahead of the one she just left. I looked at Capricorn Anderson, and that's what I saw. Not a case, but a time traveler, about to step into a world that had forgotten the 60s except for JFK and the Beatles. In my right hand was a piece of paper with the address of the foster home the Department of Child Services had assigned for this boy. I crumpled it up and tossed it into the nearest trash can. Well, Capricorn, it looks like you're going to be staying at my house for a few weeks. Absolutely not, he exclaimed. I have to get back to the community. The plums aren't in yet. And after that, the apples. Everything has to be ready for when Rain comes home. I remembered Rain. She was one of the founders of Garland, the queen bee of the place when I lived there. I was always afraid of her. I thought she was a witch. Wait a minute. I put 2 and 2 together. Rachel Esther Rosenblatt is Rain, your grandmother? He brightened. You know her? That's when I figured out the key to Capricorn's heart. So I could do what needed to be done and for his own good. I used to, way back before you were born. My family lived at Garland. Rain would want you to be with someone who understands. I had a reluctant house guest. So I can make a bunch of inferences here about who Mrs. Donnelly is, maybe some of her feelings towards Rain. It seems like she's a little nervous about her, and yet Cap seems to really value her, so that's probably going to tell me something. So I can make some predictions now about the plot of this story, about where it's going to go. And good readers do that. They kind of ask questions in their head, they make predictions, they test their ideas, they see if they're true. We're going to read one more chapter because that one was insanely short, and maybe this one will be too. Yep, sure looks like it. So I'm going to read you chapter 3. We're going to meet another character. So we've met Mrs. Donnelly, who's a social worker. We've met Capricorn Anderson, who is our main character. And now we're going to meet Zach Powers. Name, Zach Powers. I high-fived my way off the school bus, slapping hands on both sides of the aisle. Hey, Zach! How's it going, man? I jumped down to the tarmac of the school's driveway. It was a beautiful September day. This was my time. 8th grade, captain of the football and soccer team, big man on campus. After 2 years of looking up to other people, I'd finally made it to the point where there was nobody to look up to but me. Everything was perfect. I frowned. Well, not quite perfect. I noticed that the sign on the front lawn read, "Welcome to Claveridge Middle School." They'd fixed it again. Unacceptable. I did a quick scan to confirm there were no teachers looking on. Mr. Sorensen's eyes were on the buses, so his back was turned. I reached up and snatched off a letter. The sign now read, "Welcome to C. Average Middle School." Much better. I stuffed the L behind the bushes and walked on, enjoying the admiration of some 7th grade girls. It was a dangerous job, but somebody had to do it. At C. Average Middle School, the buck stopped with me. Not that I was nobody last year. I was still probably the most happening 7th grader in the place. But it isn't really your school until you're a senior. I wasn't going to drop the ball on any of it. For example, the election for 8th grade president was coming up. Not that I was running myself. God forbid. The tradition at C. Average was to nominate the biggest loser in the building. No one runs against him, of course, and he wins automatically. Then, for the rest of the year, you get the pleasure of watching President Bonehead giving speeches, running assemblies, and making a complete idiot out of himself. It's top-notch entertainment, if you nail exactly the right guy. I was pretty sure I had the front runner all picked out. Ever since kindergarten, the primo nerd, bar none, had been Hugh Winkleman. Over the years, the doofus had been on the receiving end of so many wedgies that he had elastic waistband material fused to the top of his head. Pardon the exaggeration. In a million years, there could not have been anyone more perfect for this job than Hugh. Or so I thought. I was on my way to homeroom when Mr. Kazaski, the assistant principal, flagged me down. Standing beside him was the strangest looking kid I'd ever seen. He was tall and skinny as a rake. I swear he'd never been anywhere near a barbershop in his life. His long blonde flyaway hair stretched all the way down to the middle of his back. His clothes looked like pajamas, homemade pajamas, and his shoes were something out of a social studies project on the pioneer days. They were sandals woven out of corn husks and rustled when he moved. Kazaski introduced us. Zach Powers, meet Capricorn Anderson. Cap just transferred here. Yeah, from the planet Krypton? Show him to locker 743 and make sure he gets to homeroom. He rushed off in the direction of the office. The weirdest thing about Capricorn Anderson was this. He was looking at me like I was the freak. Like he'd never seen another kid before. Come on, Cap, follow me. We walked down the hall, picking up more than our fair share of attention. New kid, I said aloud, just in case anybody thought he was actually with me. Kazaski asked me to show him around. Locker 743, here it is, I told him. You've got the combo, right? He just stared at me blankly. The combination? I prompted. There, printed on the top of your orientation form. But what does it mean? I would have sworn he was putting me on, except he looked so bewildered. Here, I'll show you. 1733-5. There was a click and the door swung open. He peered in as if he expected to find a mountain lion laying in wait. It's empty. He was beginning to rile me. Of course it's empty. It's your locker. It's empty until you put something in it. What do I have to put in there? He demanded. How should I know? It's your stuff. When we lock things away, he said with conviction, we're really imprisoning ourselves. Now that was definitely something you didn't hear every day. What school did you go to before this? I'm homeschooled, he informed me. I'm only here because Rain broke her hip and they won't let me live alone at the community. Hugh Winkleman, you're a lucky man. With the arrival of this new kid, all the losers in school were bumped down one space. Never before had anyone screamed for the job of 8th grade president like Capricorn Anderson. This was my year. Well, Zach Powers, of course, we'll hear more from him. He's a very special, special friend.